Welcome, everybody, to the Lonestar REIA podcast, where we talk everything real estate from wholesaling, flipping to creative finance. Whether you're just starting out or you've done 100 deals, you're in the right place. Again, we talk everything real estate on this. And with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to our host, Mr. Ray Sasser.
Thank you, James. Just so y'all know, we've got a few of us on the call today. It's going to be Daniel and Sol and James and I, and of course, Peter Fortunato. Peter, we talked you somehow into coming to town, I don't even know, 10 or 15 years ago, and we did a 2-day event. And one of the highlights of my career is I got the honor of being able to introduce you to the audience. And I think we probably had 100 or 50 people in the room. And not only was it very important and powerful to me, it must have been very important to everybody in the room because you got a rousing standing ovation at the end of that second day. And I am so glad that you're still with us and you're still as sharp as ever, and that and somehow we've talked you into coming and joining us in July 25th and 26th. Is that right?
Yes, it's the last week in July. We'll have down in the links, wherever the links are, we'll have a link somewhere that'll have a link to register for the 2-day workshop, but it's the last weekend in July.
I'm really looking forward to that. Sometimes people, when I would go to see Peter or Jack Miller, I realized after 3 or 4 times of going to their stuff, it really didn't matter what the name of the topic was. It was just mandatory for Ray Sasser to be in the room. And I think when you make a decision to be in the right rooms, the right things kind of happen to us. Now, today, what we're going to do, we're going to try to break this down. I had it as tire kickers and then beginners and estate builders and then enders, but I like Peter's version of it better. We're going to talk a little bit about the dreamers/beginners as the first part. And the second part, we'll talk about estate builders. And the third part is enders, because depending on where you're at in that journey, we all have different challenges. And when Peter comes and talks to us, what I love about Peter is it doesn't matter who you are, it has something to do with where you're at. So anything you want to say starting out, Peter?
Well, I like to talk about real estate, and I started right after I got out of high school, so that was 1965, and my job was to help other people in order to earn something for myself. We just saw one another in Atlanta, and I was talking in Atlanta about, you remember when you got out of high school and hopefully your net worth was as high as zero. In my world, the people who I spend time with and who I enjoy are all capitalists who understand that this is the land of opportunity, and the opportunities that surround your life are yours to be seized and turned into something. And getting from the point where your net worth is zero or sometimes less to a point where you have enough capital to fund your lifestyle so you can do whatever you damn well please is something we should all aspire to. And so when I talk to other people who are on that journey, we can cooperate in order that we all benefit. When I talk to people who are not on the journey, who think that they are victims and don't understand that they can change their life, it's much more difficult for me. In my world, I know all the people I've done business with. I remember them. I talk to them. I look forward to talking with them. And I have neighbors who I have lived next door to for years and have no idea what their name is.
Yeah. Daniel, what country are you from?
Romania.
And do you feel like it's like that in Romania?
It's definitely a lot more opportunity here, and a lot more. You have all the institutions in the right place to help you build something out of nothing, which is definitely something I enjoy about this country, and I try to use it and to bring value to the country as well, and to use it for my building on my career as well.
And I want to apologize to you, Peter, because I brought them to your office at McDonald's.
Yeah.
And they surrounded you, and they basically pushed out all the light and everything, and they would not let you go. And they just kept you hostage there, I think an hour or two longer than what you would normally spend there.
I go to the McDonald's here in Madeira Beach every single morning if I'm in town. The only day I miss is the day on Thursdays, because it then conflicts with the exchange meeting, and I always go to the exchange meeting. But I'm delighted to have people come to me. I've been going there since 1986, and people realize that I'm there, that I talk about real estate. We had a man come to see me yesterday who's got a condo that's been on the market for half a year without a single offer, and he wants to do something. So he asked if he could be included, and of course we couldn't be more inclusive. People sit down and talk, and we've got one of the estate builders making him an offer right now that hopefully will turn into a deal where we will trade his condo for a house to someone who's older, who's fed up with lawns, and will actually pay the condo fee in order to have an elevator building with no yard work for themselves. And we will take their house, and the older gentleman who owns the condo will take a note giving him income. And without him coming up and talking to us at McDonald's, he'd have continued to have that thing sitting in MLS, hoping and praying that somebody came and forced cash on him.
And complaining that this real estate stuff doesn't work.
Well, yeah. The most complaints we get is from people when we say, tell us about an offer you've written that didn't work. And they say, offer? And that's just terrible. That's just terrible.
What you bring up a good point, though, is you have a person maybe who's a beginner or a estate builder, and when they run across the ender, or the ender runs across the estate builder, all kinds of magic can happen.
Yeah, that's why when I was earning $4,000 a year, I took an estate building and tax avoidance class from Charles Considine at $4,000 a year, and with a net worth that was less than $5,000. I wasn't in need of his tax advice for myself, but I was in need of his tax advice so that I could provide benefits for people who did need it and thereby earn a position for myself in the deal. And one of the things that distresses me is when I do talk about the dreamer who dreams that one day they could have enough assets, and then the starter who actually goes and gets their first deal. They've made some friends, they've asked for help, and they've made that offer, and it may or may not close. Then they made another offer, and they don't give up, and they finally have some real estate. And then they get to the point where they have a number of pieces of real estate, and they have to get their systems in place in order to manage their portfolio well. And they start increasing the quality of their holdings in order to make their life easier. And then they get to that point where they're an ender, in my view, or a spender in Valerie Schaub's view, or a harvester in Chad Carson's view. But in any case, they have enough assets to fund their lifestyle. And all of those people exist in every market. And very commonly, I need something that a starter has because they have energy and time. And I need something that an ender has because they have and money to lend. I need something that the estate planner or the estate builder has because they may have excess properties. And I need that starter because they still have all that optimism and all that time. And so very regularly, I use those catalysts to put deals together. And so I see the marketplace as full of people in different stages of the journey. So I don't use it simply as a way to grade my performance and my advancement in my estate plan. And when I got to the point where I was an ender, I had enough assets to set me free, that by no means meant it was time to stop. It was time to continue to interfere in the lives of others, at least believe that I was making them better.
Right. It's as you're explaining how you use the different elements of the where people are and what their experience is and what their resources and what their time allowance is that they have. The first time that I ever saw what I call a Peter Fortunato diagram, where it shows the different parts of a deal where you have like tax and use and stuff. It's like it opens your horizon. I mean, for the first time you realize this is a big world out there. There's 100 ways to do things. We don't have to we got to look at the bigger picture and see how we can help other people.
Yeah, it's mostly, in my view, being successful in any business is an attitude that I am going to help. I can do something positive for someone, and that doesn't simply mean bringing money to a deal, because no one wants money. And I like to tell people around here when I'm talking to them that using money to close a deal is a sign of intellectual inadequacy or laziness.
Yeah. You gave an example once where if I come back a year from now, will that pile of money still be sitting on the coffee table? That was eye-opening for me, because it's like, yeah, it's nothing when it's sitting on the coffee. It has no power sitting on the coffee table. We owe it to them to help them use the power, not just hand them money.
We need to find out what's going on. People are not giving up a nice piece of property without there being an uncomfortable circumstance in their lives that generates that willingness to give it up, or that desire, that need to give it up. That's why I always ask that question. Why would you sell a nice house like this? Because I need to find out what's going on to see if I can help.
Yeah. And the way we're kind of talking, like if you're a beginner, it's like, well, I don't care about that. How do I make $20,000 next week? So how do we address the beginners? How do we kind of say, look, follow me. We're on the right path. You just got to be patient and you got to understand where we're headed. How do we get that through to them?
Well, first you have to get it through to people who understand that capitalism works. See, when you have people who are sure that the way to live is to be a wage slave and to condemn yourself to poverty for your old age, you can do very little for those people. You can try, you can preach, you can point out other people who they know who are better off because they have some capital assets, which appreciate as the dollar devalues. But if people won't listen, I like to tell people, and I tell people regularly, that there's no such thing as an impossible deal, but there are impossible people.
Mm-hmm.
And when I run into that, I will try to help them. I will make suggestions. I will say, in the event that you could do this, is there any reason why you wouldn't do it?
Right.
But if they are insisting that they're not going to do anything to help themselves, I can mourn them, but I can't help them.
One of the things that you just said, oftentimes people say the most incredible things and people completely miss it. But you said, be a wage slave or condemn yourself to poverty.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not this. If we get one pass through this life, we need to take ownership of it. And we need to not just willingly give up our time and our energy to selling our time for a check. We never need to do that. So in order to control it, I mean, it's time to when you come to town, if they don't show up, they don't get it.
At some point, you'd like to be free to do what you choose to do. And if you're too busy earning a life to enjoy a life, that's sad.
Yeah. And it's not necessary. It's not required.
Absolutely.
So,
Well,
Peter, I want to chime in because there was something that stuck out to me because I talk to a lot of our members and I try to put my newbie hat on as much as and when I'm talking to people. But you said there's no such thing as an impossible deal, just impossible, but people can be impossible. Can you kind of explain that a little bit? Because one of the things that I see a lot of is people get hung up on, they want to wholesale for quick money like Ray just mentioned, or I can't do a deal because I don't have the money.
If I were waiting until I had the money, I'm now 79 years old, and I'd almost be ready to buy my first house. And so waiting till you have the money is as bad as it can get. You have to acquire and control some capital assets as early on as you possibly can so that those assets grow and provide an income stream for you as you age. In my case, I got out of high school. I had told everybody that I was never going to raise my hand and ask permission ever again. And I was going to get enough assets, enough rental property so that I could live on the rental income from my apartments back in those days, not have to go out and sacrifice my time and my freedom to earn a living. And so I told everyone in my hometown that's what I was planning to do. And I asked them all for help. And it's really important you understand you have to ask for help and you have to tell people what you aspire to so that they ask you, how are you progressing? Because you want someone other than you to hold you accountable. My life was built around promises that I made to myself and promises I made to others. And when I started and had absolutely nothing, I used promises as my currency to get properties more than anything else. And to this date, the majority of my deals are based upon the promises that I make in exchange for deeds or control of a property.
So just thinking about being a beginner, I guess the first thing to do, and maybe give us some feedback on this, but it seems like you got to have the vision.
That's why I call it dreamer. You have to have that dream of, it's like reading a Horatio Alger story about how a young person found a mentor, followed them, and made a small business for themselves, had a successful financial deal for themselves, bought their first horse back in the old days and used the horse to earn some money for them. Whatever it is, but it's a matter of dreaming that dream, of believing that you can build a better life. I grew up on the North Shore of Boston in the 1950s and 60s. And all of my neighbors, all of them, came from different places from all around the world. And they all came to the United States because of the dream of building a better future for their family. And I had wonderful examples all around me. And those are the people that you have to look for and then follow. I can't tell you how many people I've introduced myself to and said, "Hi, my name is Peter Fortunato. I want to grow up to be just like you. How did you get where you are?"
I think, and we tell that to people to try to talk them into becoming members, is hang out with the people doing what you want to do. And a lot of these things I say, Peter, I don't realize I'm stealing them from people like you and other people that went before me because my memory is not that good, but I learned the lesson.
It's just universally, the people who succeed are happy that someone else succeeds. They encourage, they inspire people, and they help when they can. And so when you are that kind of person, you relate to that kind of person.
Right, right. So show up. You just got to be where the stuff is happening, and it'll become contagious.
When I was a kid, I had almost saved $5,000. And I had, in my marketplace on the North Shore of Boston, I had an investor who wanted to borrow $5,000 at percent secured by a second mortgage. And I had a realtor who was holding a note from a wage slave. It was a second mortgage. And it was written at 10%, and it would be sold at a discount. So the combination of the 10% interest and the discount was a much bigger number,
right,
than the 8%. And people were surprised when I used the only $5,000 in cash I had in the entire world to make the loan to the investor. But the reason that I did it is I wanted a relationship, an alliance with that investor. And the 8% was nowhere near as much as the 15% yield offered by the mortgage. But the school teacher who owed the mortgage was never going to do another deal. Or if they did a deal, it would be to buy another house in 15 years. And the investor was buying 2 or 3 or 4 properties per year and had successfully done some of them. So I made that deal with him, and I got myself invited in my very early 20s to meetings with him. And those values, the benefit of going and talking with him about what he was doing, about being able to say to him, "It seems silly that you send me $50 a month. How about you just give me 10% of the property, and then you won't have to owe me this note," and having him laugh at me and refuse to do it. Nonetheless, that relationship was a benefit that was greater than the difference in yield, in my view. And so I did that on purpose.
You've told us that forever. And in my life experience, now I've been doing this 40 plus years, no truer words have ever been spoken. The people you hang out with are real important, and they're a continuing resource. They never go away. Once they know and trust and like you, they're never going to go away. And if we help each other, we all benefit. So
yeah, that's why when you have an opportunity, you go straight back to the people you've done business with in the past and ask them for help.
Yeah, and yield is not what it's about. It's about the relationship.
Yeah. We just talked in Atlanta about I borrowed $10,000 from the tenant in my second building to use as the cash portion to buy my fourth building. And had I not had that kind of a relationship with my tenants and expected my tenants to be my allies, I might not be able to get to that property because I didn't have $10,000. And I was earning less than $10,000 a year. And I also wanted to eat. And so it would have been a long time coming up with that money. And instead, I had a tenant who was getting 3% in the local bank. And I offered her 9% and got $10,000 that I used to buy a fourplex, a block from the beach in a great neighborhood.
Yeah. And you've got to ask yourself, what if you wouldn't have got that fourth building? What would have happened?
Yeah. Or what if I had to get that first building?
Yeah.
And you've heard me tell the story many times, I know, Ray, but when I bought a triplex from John Pochask, who was an old guy in his late 40s back then. And he had a tenant who had not taken care of an apartment that he fixed up. He was lamenting the fact that his tenant had not respected his work and the housing that he provided. And so he was going to sell that property. And I bought that property from him. I bought it subject to the first mortgage. He carried a second mortgage. He introduced me to the local banker who had lent him the first mortgage. And as a result of that, I bought another triplex. And when I ended up finishing college, I had 6 small apartment buildings, small meaning triplexes and fourplexes. And one of them was this one, but I bought it from John back in 2000 and back in 1970. And in 2000, and when he passed away, he and I had done 27 transactions together.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And just think how much more efficient and how much easier it was to do business again and again with a person who you knew, who you had a rapport with, who you liked and who liked you.
Yeah.
Those are important things. Those are cornerstones, foundational things in building an estate, and doing business again and again with financial friends makes it much easier.
And the thing is, investors who have been doing this for a while, they like hanging out with each other. They understand it. They understand the power of it. And so when we have these meetings and we have these get-togethers, like Daniel's on the phone and he does our haves and wants every week, you need to go to that stuff. You need to let people know who you are. You need to let them know what your power is or ability or your special talent is, and immerse yourself in it.
If you keep it a secret, it's hard to have people help you.
One thing, I want to move on to estate builders a little bit, but you said something that the very first person I met that was kind of in the group that you hang out with was Jimmy. And he talked about Constantine every time he turned around. And then Miller would say it, and you threw his name out today. And I never got to hear him or see anything. I wish I would have been there. I just missed him, apparently.
If you can find his book, Philosophy of Real Estate, you'll find the first edition of it, because he only made one edition. But Constantine's book, Philosophy of Real Estate, is really an excellent book. But he's probably the smartest guy I ever met.
Well, that means something coming from you. And of course, Jimmy, we quote him all the time. I mean, I can still hear Jimmy's voice. Well, Constantine says.
Now, see, I always remember Jimmy talking about when he started, the houses in Chipley were $15,000 each. And he wasn't going to buy one unless he could get it for $20,000. A few years went by and they were $20,000. And he wasn't going to buy it unless he could get it for $15,000. And then there was $30,000 and he wasn't going to buy it unless he could get it for $20,000. And he said, now there are $150,000. They're the same house. I should have just bought them all at $15,000 when I started, instead of fooling around, insisting on getting that $20 discounted price.
Well, I'm trying to remember if it was Jack or Jimmy that tells a story about you sleeping on the floor in the hotel room.
Could have been many people. I've done that a lot.
Yeah, you got to be where the action is, no matter what it takes to get there.
Hey, I want to interrupt right quick and give a note to our viewers, also our editor as well. Guys, if you're going back and rewatching this, listen and pay attention. And anytime there's a book, because I know there's been a couple of books referenced, a couple of people referenced, rewind, write that down, and then go on afterwards and Google it or use either search for it, but find that resource. We're on this podcast, at our events, we're open books. And so the resources that we offer have helped us or somebody on this call in some form or fashion. So go back and rewind and find the resources, and we'll try to put them in the comments as well.
Awesome. Now, we've got 2 estate builders on the call, Peter, and that's Sol and Daniel. And when they came to that McDonald's, I was almost embarrassed, but they basically hijacked you. And they weren't just like sitting across the room and shouting at you. They were sitting up almost right in your face, asking questions. They're on the call with us now. Do y'all have anything y'all want to talk to Peter about or ask him anything in particular?
I have a question. So since you've been doing this for 60 years, Pete, now you have quite a few investors that have been investing for maybe 3-4 years since the pandemic, maybe, when we've seen those super fast appreciation for rent, for prices and everything. Now, after a year or two of kind of flat growth, we see a lot of them kind of flocking out and kind of saying that real estate doesn't really work anymore. You don't have cash flow anymore. Appreciation is not there right now. So I think that's just too focused of a lens for the last 4 years, so they don't see the big cycle. And you being in this industry for 60 years, I think you can provide a little bit of background on what we should expect. And is it still worth investing in rental properties today? is a question that you see pretty common now on forums for real estate and on groups for real estate investors. What would you say to somebody that has doubts about their choices for industry?
If I can acquire a property that someone else will buy for me, I am going to do that deal. So if I structure a deal so the payments on that house, which primarily I'm doing houses, can be made by the person who enjoys the house, I'm happy to have them enjoy my house while they buy it for me. And that is all the benefit that I need, is that I can acquire a house for my family, for my kids, for my grandkids, that someone else will pay. I'm sure you've heard me say it, but my grandson said to me one day when he was 9, he said, "Grampy, what do you do anyway?" And I said, "Well, Luca, I acquire nice houses in nice neighborhoods that I rent to nice people who take care of those houses and pay for the house for me." And that is a short and sweet example of what I do. I got out of high school and I got control of 6 small apartment buildings. Over the next 5 years, I wrote 200 contracts, some of which were accepted and none of which closed in the first 2 years. But my future depended on getting some assets. And finally, I bought a house for $33,000 with $3,000 down and $100 in closing costs. And I had to borrow $1,600 of that $3,000 from my parents. But I got control of one house. That house now, 60 years have gone by, or 58 years have gone by. So I've had the benefit of living a long time. But that house is $1 million today, and the tenants paid for it. Then I bought another property for $20,000 with no money down, and those tenants paid for it. And that property is $750,000 today. And that is primarily because of the devaluation of the currency. And anybody that doesn't recognize that that currency loses value, the counterfeiter who prints that money gets to spend it at present value. They spend it into the money supply and let everybody else suffer with the lesser buying power. In my case, I've lived through that since the 1960s, and I've watched my 5-cent first-class postage when I started go to 78 cents today. And so I tell people all the time in the class, if I met you in 1965 and I said, "Gee, I really need $1," and I borrowed $1 from you, I could take that dollar and do 20 first-class mailings. And now I bump into you today and said, "Gee, haven't seen you for a long time. I owe you $1." And I paid you back that dollar. I've given you back less than 1.25 mailings for the 20 you gave me. And so being aware of the fact that if you measure your success in dollars rather than in assets, you're at risk. You need to get some capital assets, however you get them. I had 6 multifamily properties. That's the biggest portfolio of doors, that's what they call them today, that I've ever had. And at that point in time, with 20 rentals, being 4 triplexes and 2, I got married, 19. So now I'm becoming that estate builder that Ray was talking about. I've got 20 rentals and I've got a wife now. And a year later, we had a baby, and then we had another baby, and then we had another baby, and I needed more free time. And so at that point in time, I 1031 exchange all my multis into single family houses, because for my life, I wanted more free time, and the single family houses were easier for me. The people in the multifamilies wanted services, and I'm not good at providing services. The people in a single family house want privacy, and I am great at giving them privacy. And so I can leave people alone for a decade at a time, and that really worked well for me. And so we went and built that portfolio up, and in 1980, when our kids were 7, 5, 4, and 2, we went and boiled that portfolio down from what at that point was 33 houses down to 20 better houses. And so you're always making those adjustments to, well, at the thing we just did out in Atlanta, one of the speakers talked about the difference between empire building and lifestyle building. And I do have friends who've built empires and have hundreds of houses, but I really was building or attempting to build lifestyle for me and Jean and for our kids, and the freedom to travel in the summer and do those things. And when we got to 40 houses, which was the highest we ever got in the low 40s. We then backed it down to 33 better ones. And then at 33, we backed down to 20 better ones. And we were retired on 9 very nice rental houses 2 years ago before the hurricanes came. Suddenly, 5 of my 9 were not rentable. And I discovered that I had shot too low. And so we have added 3 more houses in the last 2 years. But we're not looking to create the empire with hundreds of houses. We're looking to make sure that our lifestyle is comfortably covered by the net income from our rentals.
Yeah, and you tell that story. I think it's really important about the guy that had lots and lots of houses, but he had no life.
Well, he thought he was very happy doing what he did, but he went to Europe with 2 of my friends. And I tell a story all the time. One friend had 18 houses, which is a great portfolio. The other one had 48 apartments in 8 unit buildings, let's say. And then the other guy had 850 houses. And when they wanted to stay in Europe for an extra week, only the guy with the 850 houses, who was the wealthiest guy I knew at that time in my life, he was the one who did not have the freedom to stay there. He had things that were forcing him to go home. And I know people who have well over 1,000 houses, and they're proud and they built an enormous estate. But that's not the goal of most of the people who I know. And you work to your goal. You pursue the things you're happy with. I show that T-bar all the time. People give up what they like less for what they like more. And one of the things I like more is more free time to sit and read or to travel with my family. And so those are the things that I prioritize.
Yeah, I remember Jimmy early on, we had started buying houses, and Jimmy said, if you're not careful, you'll end up getting rid of your good stuff and end up with all the bad stuff.
Yeah.
And as I listened to you talk about the strategy, like how do you call the herd? How do you make it the best inventory?
Yeah. My estate plan as I built it out was to get better and better neighborhoods where I had longer and longer term tenants. We self-insured because the value of the lots underneath our houses became the majority of the value in our properties. Yeah, Ray, I think you've been to my house here. My house is a 1950s house on the bay here in St. Pete. And
Right.
There's 105 feet of water frontage. And years ago, we had a realtor come to the door and say, I've got a builder and we'll pay you $800,000 for your house. And if you'll take your house with you, we'll give you an extra $100,000. Because if the storm came and took our houses, we lost our income, but we didn't lose our net worth.
Right.
And when I was younger and I was starting, the majority of the value in our properties was in the improvements, which brought rents in. And the lot was 15, 20, 25% of the value. And as we got older, we increasingly placed our value in the land underneath our houses.
Yeah. So the message to the estate builder is be careful what you're doing because it can get out of control and you've given up too much.
Go to quality as soon as you can.
Yeah. Now, there's some people that are going to come when you come to Houston are going to be enders. So as an ender, like, would you consider yourself an ender even though you're very active in the real estate community?
I became an ender actually in my late 30s, middle 30s.
Oh, wow.
And that did not make me an ender in terms of my attitude. And so I have spent, now that I'm 79 years old, the last 20 years of my life, I have primarily spent trying to help dreamers, starters, estate builders improve what they do, get better properties, go to quality rather than go to more quantity. I'm always quoting Larry Harbaugh's story, which just tickled me when Larry said that he went out and bought 10 houses in a week and then went home and he was so proud of himself that he ripped open his shirt and painted a big S on his chest. And he said it was 2 weeks later before he realized the S stood for stupid, because while each individual deal was a good deal, 10 was too many and he was drowning.
Yeah. That's not Larry.
We have a very tight community of investors who really do, from the starters, the dreamers, meet regularly and sit down in McDonald's and sit down at Denny's and sit down together and talk about what we're doing and see if we can counsel and help one another do better. And it gives you great joy as you get older and you see that you can both inspire and encourage and make a difference in the life of other people. And it's really important to me now because I'm so old that I get a remarkable number of people talking to me and emailing me, showing me, telling me what I have done that has helped them. And that's an enormous income for me. That's not a financial income, but it makes me very proud.
You've impacted a lot of people's lives, and a lot of people that I hang out with, you've impacted. So
Whether they like it or not, right?
good point. We're going to close out because I don't want to tie you up all day. But Sol and Daniel, I'm going to have James talk about the upcoming meeting and maybe address any of that. But if y'all have any final questions or something after James talks about the meeting coming up, let's ask him while we got him on the phone with us.
Yeah, I had a question. I guess I'll wait for James to announce.
Watch the links, the comments, wherever they are. We have our monthly meeting every month on the second Saturday in Houston and second Tuesday in San Antonio. Get more information there. But I want to specifically talk about the weekend that, Peter, you're going to come spend with us in Houston. We're still building a lot of the components of it, but I've been told that the theme of it is use your brain, not your dollars. So kind of share with the viewers and the audience. We spent this whole probably hour or so, we're talking about it, but just kind of narrow in now. What can the viewers expect when they come see you the last weekend in July?
I'm going to talk about doing good, benefiting other people. So from my perspective, my job is to find out what is troubling other people and make them better off. Participate, show them, make a deal. Example of this, when I was a real estate agent, we're talking about back in 71, I had a young man who inherited a house from his uncle. And the house was a typical inherited from your uncle's house, which was in good shape, but really outdated. And back then, that house in a good neighborhood in Beverly could have been shined up and modernized and sold for 60 instead of selling it as is for, and perhaps you've spent $10,000 to create 20. And so I suggested to the young man who had inherited the place that he borrow the money, because the house was free and clear, and spend his time, fix the place up, and make the extra money. And he said to me, oh no, this is my one big opportunity. I'm going to sell the house, I'm going to cash it out, and with that fortune, I'm going to make a better life for myself. And so I said to him, what do you see yourself doing? And he said, my college roommate is killing it as a dealer in Las Vegas. And I want to sell this house and go to Vegas and join him. And so I once again tried to talk him into fixing the place up and making the extra money for himself. And he flew out to visit his friend and came back and said to me, I can't wait to get out there. And I had a rehabber who wanted to buy that house and fix it and sell it. And so Roger, the rehabber who bought it, gave the young man who inherited the house a new car. And to give you an idea, back in 1970, a new Oldsmobile right out of the showroom was $3,700. We gave him the new car to go to Vegas and show off in. And we gave him a seller carried note with a payment that equaled the rent he had to pay for a condo on the strip or near the strip out in Vegas. Because we found that out, the young guy that bought it, instead of paying hard money rates, which back then may well have been 18%, got much more reasonable rates, got a payment that he could afford. The gentleman who sold his house got his rent paid so he could go to Vegas, and he got his new car to go. My friend, who was the rehabber, fixed the house up and then listed it with me, and I sold it, and he made an additional profit. But that time that's spent building a custom solution for people is time well spent. And I'll talk about doing those kinds of deals over and over again. I spoke at Tampa REIA, and I talked about how value is subjective. And when I talk about how value is subjective, it's not God-given. It's not some appraiser saying that you got to balance equities. And I explain that people take what they like better and give up what they like less. I can see the people in the audience yawning as I'm talking about subjective value. And then after the REIA meeting, they have a have-wants meeting. And one of the guys gets up at the have, he says, I've got a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that I want to sell. It's a rental house. Got a good tenant in there. And so, of course, I had to ask, why would you sell a nice house like that?
Right. Right.
And he said, we need to get a car for my daughter. In the last month, my wife and I have had to go out and rescue my daughter and our grandchildren where their car had broken down 3 times. We've had to do that in the last month. So we're going to sell this house and we're going to get her a car. And so when he said that, I offered him my Chrysler minivan, free and clear, for an option to buy his house in 15 years and not before.
Excellent.
And he took the car, he kept his rental house and kept the cash flow from it. And I controlled the growth in that house because I heard why he was doing it. And no one remembers a word I said about subjective value, but they remember I had to bum a ride home because I gave him my car right there on the spot.
Anything else you want to say about the upcoming meeting, James? And then we'll get to Soul and any questions, Daniel.
No, I mean, that right there, if you're not sold on coming to the works, I don't know what else to say.
You can only hit a person so many times with a 2x4. So you had a closing question, or Daniel?
I think Saul had to.
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much a closing question, but it might help close this out. Peter, I wanted to ask, like I hear you have grandkids. If your grandkids were of age and they had a dream, they were the dreamers wanting to do what you do, what advice would you give your grandkids in terms of getting started as a beginner? That's one. And then if you want to elaborate, what advice would you give your grandkids to become an estate builder? And then what advice would you give your grandkids as an ender? Kind of like a threefold question.
All right, well, what I told my grandkids, well, my grandson specifically, was I acquire nice houses in nice neighborhoods that I rent to nice people who take care of the houses and pay for them for me. And that's something I think any kid can understand. And I certainly talk to them about the fact that they have to have some assets to enable them to have the free time. I preach a lot. I read Richest Man in Babylon, 1 chapter time to them as bedtime stories when they were small. I talk about capitalism. They see capitalism in their world daily because all of my kids, their parents, are investors. But in my life, Gene and I raised 4 kids, and we're enormously proud of them. And I took such pride in the fact that I was such a good teacher that they all became investors. And I had no idea that nothing I said got them to be investors. It was the life that we lived that made them investors. My kids, when they got to be 20, every one of them at different times said, Dad, our friends spend more time with their coworkers than they do with their families. And my kids were used to spending time with their family and see me able to travel with them and not have to return to a job. And it was the lifestyle we lived. And I think it's the lifestyle you live that's reflected in your kids' and grandkids' lives.
Love it. Love it. Daniel, did you have any final things?
No, I think that was great. That's a great way to close the call.
Okay. Well, Peter, I want to thank you again for coming to Houston. I don't know the last time you were here, but the last time we brought you, I want to say it's 15 years ago.
All right. It's the same to see this is happening because you asked and you're an old friend. And I mean, that's what we do. That's what we do.
Well, it'll help me because I always get something out of it. The one thing I like going to what you and Jack did is that every time I went, I was a different person. I had a different problem. I had a different thing I was trying to do. And no matter how advanced you get or how inexperienced you are, you just got to be in the room.
Yeah. Yeah. People say to me so all the time, you are really slow. You're taking this class for the 8th time. They don't recognize that what I see that day in class relates to what I see that day in the world, what I experienced at the exchange meeting. And so something I've seen dozens of times, I didn't think to put it together with an opportunity that was there right now. And that's what happens to me very regularly. I've done this 60 years and I'm in a class without fail every month.
Wow.
And I take personal notes and I realize, yeah, I've heard this 100 times before, but I can use this to put together that deal with Courtney that we just talked about this morning at breakfast.
Wow.
And I'll chime in too and say, we actually brought you in about 3 years ago. And I had the privilege of picking you up from the airport and everything. And you did our meeting and did a workshop afterwards. And let me tell you, 3 years, I was sitting there listening. We had conversations in my car and I've been in real estate for a little bit. And a lot of the conversation, it kind of went over my head. But I'm sitting here today and a lot of things that you mentioned, because I'm in around it even more now, it's starting to make a little bit more sense. So I want to touch back on a few things that we've already said here is hear it over and over, be around the other people that are doing it, and it's going to rub off on you. This stuff is contagious.
I'm going to speak to schools whenever I can find a teacher naive enough to invite me in. And when I speak at the school, I'm speaking to kids from second grade to high school age. And every single time I do, when I finish, I get teachers coming up and saying, I wish I'd heard that when I was a kid. Because Americans don't hear that capitalism works. It's a wonderful way to help others while helping yourself.
Exactly.
Well, awesome. On that note, thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Daniel, Sol, Ray. You've all been great. This has been really fun. Probably one of my most fun podcasts we've done in a while. Looking forward to it. Peter, let me say, you've got me. My brain's turning, and I've got some good goals that I'm going to try to get worked on before you get here. So, again, I don't know where it's going to be, but get registered for the workshop. It's going to be the last weekend in July. So any wedding plans, any funeral plans, any kind of plans you have, cancel it and be there. I promise you, you're not going to regret it, but you will regret it if you're not there. So, thanks for watching. Thanks, Peter. And we're out. We'll see you later. And that's the end.
Thank you very much. I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you, Pete.